It could change America. New ideas to boost faith in some of the biggest corporations. I'm Emily Druby in Washington, D.C. with a report on a game-changing conference.
New York City's cops are on high alert. New warnings they could again be targeted for attack as a patrol car is vandalized. A frustrated Pope Francis is telling American bishops what he thinks about the reaction to his apostolic exhortation. He believes he's in a no-win position. Plus, hundreds of Chinese medical workers are getting sick fighting the coronavirus, and they're afraid. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. The exciting pro-religion conference that's bringing together some of America's biggest corporations picked up steam today. Leaders in and out of the boardroom coming together at Catholic University in Washington, D.C. They're committed to a huge goal, bringing faith to work. Emily Druby is there with the latest. Emily.
Christine, the biggest idea that keeps coming up at this conference is the importance of a person being able to bring their whole self to work, faith and all. It's an issue faced every single day, and now America's top companies are doing something about it.
Thank you for giving my family a voice.
A powerful moment for Sue Warnke, an employee of her company Salesforce, thanking her for an interfaith event held after the Tree of Life synagogue shooting. That employee was a family member of one of the victims.
This is transformative.
The event was run by Faith Force, the company's interfaith employee resource group. Faith Force helps bring kosher and halal foods to the office, holds interfaith events, and promotes a safe place to pray and meditate at work. They're just one of the many faith resource groups popping up at some of the largest companies across the country. They're the new frontier in diversity, and their presence is growing. Employees from many corporations met at this conference organized by the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation.
This conference has shown really the world now that faith is welcome inside of corporate America.
The big goal, provide best practices to everyone there, like Father Greg McBrayer of American Airlines, which has policies similar to Faith Force.
We find our faith at the foundation of who we are. So to be able to bring that into the workplace, where we deal with anxieties and stresses of our jobs and our professions, is absolutely needed.
The Anglican priest wears a collar to work and feels like he can be his true self while at his job. The groundbreaking conference, co-hosted by the Bush School of Business at Catholic University, an inspiring sight for students.
It gives me so much hope as a young business student to know that maybe one day I can go out and work for one of these companies and I don't have to be worried about, wearing my crucifix around my neck to work every day.
Hope is not in short supply here at this conference, but one thing is apparent: when it comes to religious inclusion in the workplace, there's still a lot of work to be done. But still, from here, the future looks bright. In Washington, D.C., Emily Druby, Currents News. Back to you, Christine.
Thanks, Emily. Organizers are hoping to make the conference an annual event. Not far from the university campus on Capitol Hill, the Senate is getting ready to decide on stronger protections for unborn life. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is scheduling votes on two key pro-life bills. One would protect infants surviving abortions by guaranteeing they receive proper medical care. It's known as the Born Alive bill. The Pain Capable Act would ban the abortion of any unborn children capable of feeling pain. The votes are expected next week. Thousands of people in Virginia rallied at the state capitol in Richmond in support of life. They're also in favor of pro-life legislation that's being debated by lawmakers. The bishops of Richmond and Arlington led yesterday's March for Life. The clerics called for a day of prayer for the full restoration of the legal guarantee of the right to life in Virginia. NYPD cops are on high alert tonight against assassination. Just hours after the warning about a credible threat went out, the Sergeants Benevolent Association said ICE arrested an MS-13 gang member in connection to it. The union sent the alert yesterday, telling officers to be vigilant because an individual had threatened to shoot them. This after assassination attempts on officers in the Bronx last weekend. And a marked patrol car near River Avenue has been vandalized. An unidentified person is seen spray painting the words "Help Us" as it sits parked on the Bronx street. The cops are investigating the incident as criminal mischief. 3 police unions are calling it an intentional act to mock cops. The PBA tweeting criminals and anti-police agitators are laughing as our city slides downhill fast. An update tonight on that face-to-face showdown between President Trump and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo arrived at the White House late yesterday to hash out differences over the administration's ban on New Yorkers from enrolling in the Trusted Traveler program. That action came after federal officials couldn't get access to the DMV database, which has information on undocumented immigrants. The two sides failed to agree on a solution, but are going to keep talking. Mike Bloomberg on the campaign trail, again apologizing for New York's stop and frisk policy that was enforced when he was mayor.
I defended it, looking back, for too long because I didn't understand then the unintended pain it was causing to young black and brown families and their kids. I should have acted sooner and faster to stop it. I didn't, and for that I apologized.
Bloomberg first apologized ahead of announcing his candidacy for the nomination. The most powerful union in Nevada won't endorse anyone ahead of the Democratic caucuses a week from tomorrow. The Las Vegas Culinary Workers Union represents 60,000 hotel and restaurant workers. The main reason for the refusal, Medicare for All, that's being championed by several candidates. The union has its own insurance that it wants to protect. Now for troubling medical news, starting right here in the United States. The flu is raging across the country, and at least 92 children have died from the virus. That's the latest from the CDC, which also reports at least 14,000 other American deaths this flu season. About 26 million people have become sick from the disease. In China, at least 1,700 medical workers have been infected with the coronavirus while treating other patients. 6 of them have died. At the same time, doctors, nurses, and other health professionals are desperate to get their hands on face masks. Supplies in many places have run out. In the last 24 hours, China has discovered more than 5,000 new virus cases. The overall death toll is now closing in on 1,400. As you might imagine, Chinese medical workers on the front lines of the virus crisis are frightened and facing serious risks. David Culver is in Beijing with their stories.
China has likened it to a military operation, a nation's battle against the deadly novel coronavirus. It's placed healthcare workers, doctors and nurses on the front lines. Early on in the fight against the epidemic, Chinese state media aired emotional interviews like this one of the nurses explaining how she had to reassure her own parents.
I always say it's okay since we are well protected. Actually, I was just saying that to give them peace of mind. We're actually afraid and worried. But as long as we're on duty, our own sense of mission will support us to do the job.
While Chinese officials and state media praise the medical workers for their heroic efforts, some feel as though they've been sent into battle without armor. As a result, they say many of their colleagues have gone from treating patients to becoming one. One Wuhan hospital nurse, who asked we not identify her, fearing repercussions for speaking with the media, told us by text, "Right now it's really a problem. Our hospital has more than 100 people who are quarantined at home." She's one of them. She says a chest scan revealed that she had a suspected case of the virus. And this nurse posted that she contracted the virus and is now a patient at the same hospital where she works. "The inpatient floor I live on is basically filled with colleagues from my hospital," she posted, adding, "I'm afraid the virus inside my body will come out and infect these colleagues who are still standing fast on the front line."
It is a battle.
We video chatted with Dr. Ivan Hung, an infectious disease doctor at Hong Kong University Hospital. He warns it is not the healthcare workers working directly with the confirmed coronavirus patients who are most at risk, but rather
in those who are in the general medical ward or in the accident emergency areas where they triage these patients, where they are perhaps not aware that they are actually carrying the virus.
That is precisely what happened to Dr. Li Wenliang. The 34-year-old Wuhan ophthalmologist contracted the virus in mid-January, just 2 weeks after trying to sound the alarm of a then mysterious SARS-like illness. Local police reprimanded him. Li spoke briefly by phone on January 31st. Struggling to communicate, you could hear the hospital machines pulsing in the background. He died a week later. Lee's death and the fight so many healthcare workers are now enduring, a reminder of the dangers facing those tasked to stop the spread. David Culver, Beijing.
The hardline Chinese communist who spearheaded the persecution of Christians has a new job, cracking down on Hong Kong. Churches and crosses were destroyed all over China on the orders of Xia Baolong. Now he's in charge of the Hong Kong Affairs Office. For months, pro-democracy demonstrators have protested against Beijing's increasing harsh actions in Hong Kong. The 67-year-old is a close ally of Chinese leader Xi Jinping. There's a lot more news headed your way. Pope Francis is frustrated, and he's telling that to American bishops. We'll hear from them. Possible new sins against planet Earth. That's what Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is talking about in a few moments. And speaking of the environment, a record has been set. Pope Francis says the most important message in his Amazon document for U.S. Catholics is to care for the planet. But that's not what many Catholics are focusing on. And now Pope Francis is expressing his frustration over the reaction the document received. A prayerful visit to Rome by U.S. bishops who were met by a frustrated Pope. Francis expressing his feelings about the reaction to his Amazon document.
He kind of expressed some, not surprise, but he expressed, that some people were disappointed because it didn't address the issue of viri probati or married priest.
Archbishop of Miami, Thomas Wensky, along with several other U.S. bishops, spent close to 3 hours with Pope Francis yesterday as part of their ad limina visits to the Vatican. During the meeting, the Pope's apostolic exhortation, which was just released this week, was brought up.
He said, we were there to talk about the issues of the church in the Amazon. Other people wanted me to talk about celibacy, and they made that the issue. That wasn't the issue of this synod. He said it would be sad if that's the one thing they focused on, because they're not going to be happy.
Many Catholics around the world were waiting to hear the Holy Father's thoughts on married priests and women deacons, which were not in the Pope's document. Pope Francis told the bishops he's accused of not being courageous or not listening to the Holy Spirit when he says or does something someone disagrees with.
He also clarified that a synod is not a parliament in which people take majority votes on a whole bunch of issues.
The Pope spoke for quite a while on that, trying to help us understand that if it's a real synod, the only way it can be is if the Holy Spirit is at work and there's an honest effort at discernment.
And Pope Francis explained to the bishops that discernment is a process that continues even after a synod has met and a document has been published. The Holy Father's close advisors say the door is still open for married priests. The Pope's action campaign to care for creation is getting a boost tonight. Our planet just had the hottest January on record. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is reporting the findings. They say the thermometer topped 53 degrees for the month, and no place anywhere on Earth reported record cold. They're expecting 2020 to be one of the warmest years ever. Failures to protect planet Earth are getting serious attention from Pope Francis. On the heels of the Amazon summit, he has said there are plans in the works to alter official church teaching. Brooklyn's Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is with Ed Wilkinson to discuss the issue. Ed.
Thank you. We're going to talk with Bishop DiMarzio today about some new sins that the church might be instituting. Bishop, there seems to be no end to new sins.
Well, evil is with us.
In a recent Synod of Bishops over in Rome, they talked about ecology and ecological issues, and they talked about sins against the ecology. Are we making more of this than there is? People who harm the environment, that they're not guilty of sin?
Well, there's different shades of sin, and minor sins and major sins. Anything we do against what's good, again, taking care of the environment is a good, is our home, our common home, as the Holy Father said in his encyclical Laudato Si. We have a responsibility to take care of the world in which we live, because this is where we have life. So again, we just can't be bizarre or about how we deal with the environment. I think there's a responsibility we have. Now, when you come to a list of sins against the environment, well, there's certain things that are wrong that we should not be doing, and we have to find ways of changing things for the better. Again, one of the key things is the use of automobiles and gasoline and the emissions. Well, we're going to stop it tomorrow? I don't think we can. They're looking for electric cars, and they have to produce electricity to run the cars anyhow. So it's a complicated thing. But I think we have to take seriously our responsibility to keep an environment where human life, because what's at stake is human life, the future of human life. We have to look at that.
So some people make light of it by saying, what are we going to do? We go to confession and we're going to say, look, I used too much paper last week, or I turned on the car, I burned coal. I mean, you know, is this more of a political issue than a moral issue?
No, it's a moral issue. I mean, you can make light of it in that way, but it's a moral issue that we have to take seriously. Unfortunately, you know, it's been politicized too. The whole environmental issue, you know, again, what always irks me is people say, do you believe in global warming? You don't have to believe in it. Prove it to me. That's a scientific fact, or it's not. I don't have to believe it. I have to believe a lot of other things, articles of faith, but not the environmental. Prove it and show that there's a damage, and show how to change it. So I think that's the way I would look at it that way.
Yeah, I would think there's probably no debate that there is some global warming going on, because you see icebergs are melting, and certainly in January this year we're experiencing 40s and 50 degrees. It's not like an ordinary winter. But a lot of people, I think, are concerned about, well, what's causing this, and is it really man-made, and can we legislate against things in order to try to improve this thing?
Certainly, it's cyclical. Some of it you can prove that there were times when there was warming, that we didn't have all of the emissions that we have today. But clearly, the greater emissions that we have with the emerging countries, China and India, where there were hardly any cars in the past. Now, all those emissions are affecting the ozone layer, which really does affect climate. So I think that's scientifically shown, and I think we have to accept that. But the answer is not so easy to come by. What do we do? How do we change it? And what's the time frame? You know, some people say, in 2 years we're going to be in real trouble, or it's going to be 10 years, or it's 50 years. Well, the time frame doesn't make that much difference as long as we know we're going in the wrong direction. We need to change the direction, go the other direction, where we improve the environment.
And certainly, you mentioned other countries like China, where this is really a greater problem with smog issues. And how do we get those countries to go along with us? Because you know, one of the problems with the Paris Accord was that the United States was going to be paying for most of this thing, and the Chinese and other people that are really pollutants were not going to have to pay for another 10 or 15 years. So how do we get everybody involved in this and working together?
There's a sacrifice involved, and it's hard to say, you know, how do you get other countries that are not cooperating, and it looked like it was the United States' problem, but it really wasn't. It was everybody's problem. There wasn't a fair treaty that was actually workable. So again, back to the drawing boards again. Let's try to work with this. This is important. We can't ignore it. We can't be global warming, you know, deniers. I mean, there's something happening, and we have to deal with it.
Of course, the Pope's document, Laudato Si, I think, was a big step in that direction. So, thanks, Bishop, for being with us today. And now back to the news desk.
Thank you, Ed and Bishop DiMarzio. Pope Francis is marking the 5th anniversary of his landmark encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si, that was released February 12, 2015. In May, he'll go to a region in southern Italy that has been poisoned by toxic waste. The environment was the topic of discussion when the Pope met with Brazil's former president, Lula da Silva. The Holy Father blessed Lula, who spent 580 days in prison after being convicted of corruption. He was allowed to travel to Rome after Brazilian justices agreed to free him while he appeals his case. Still to come on Currents News on this St. Valentine's Day, we'll hear from a couple who credits faith for everything. The Italian city where the saint was born is looking for a sister in the U.S. And a programming alert. Join us next week for a Currents News special presentation, Human Trafficking Exposed, next Thursday at 8 p.m. On this St. Valentine's Day, the Italian city where he was born is looking for a sister in the United States. The city of love, Terni, in central Italy, wants to link up with an American location. The town already has partnerships in France, Hungary, and Spain. Requirements include a city with a romantic touch. Terni will take submissions until September, and the winner will be announced next Valentine's Day. And on this day for love, we bring you a special story from our Michelle Powers about a marriage that has lasted through decades of good times and bad. The reason? Unrelenting love and faith that God will provide.
Even though the laughs roll now at Mr. and Mrs. Kelly's house, their love story started a little slow.
So you met on July 9th, but then you didn't call Marie for 4 months?
That's right.
When Bill finally got around to it, he called her back with an invitation to a dance.
I needed a date.
I was arm candy, is that the expression they use?
But she wouldn't see him again after that for another month. Only after that time, the rest was history. Within a year, they were married on September 10th, 1955. The very next day, they left on their honeymoon.
I was mad at him. Our first argument.
Both the newly married Kellys loved a good party, and their wedding was one. A little too good.
Somehow we found out that the party continued at my mother and father's house.
Yeah.
So they were all having a good, and he was sorry that he was
left too early.
With me picking
Since
up,
then, they've hosted hundreds of parties, surrounded by the huge family they created.
Emily, Sarah.
They spend their time in the company of 7 children, 25 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren.
The house just seemed to get smaller and smaller. But each gathering was just getting better and better.
But they were always missing something.
The very, very trying times were losing the 2 children, one baby 8 months old and the 6 years old.
Though Bill and Marie stopped speaking to each other, they refused to give up on their marriage.
It was how you were taught.
Yeah.
You have to work your way through. We were lucky that we had, I consider, good base.
That base was their faith. They committed themselves to work on their marriage because they made a promise to each other and to God.
Without our faith, my own faith, those trying times, I never would have gotten through them.
Marie later gave birth to 6 more kids, but she and Bill still made time to help counsel other young couples in pre-Cana classes. They always say the secret to marriage is communication and something else.
And that sense of humor, because anything we thought was serious, now we can laugh about.
In Marine Park, Michelle Powers, Currents News.
Finally tonight, a loving reunion almost a year in the making. Astronaut Christina Cook was excited to return to Earth after her historic mission, the longest single space flight by a woman. But one member of her family was particularly happy to see her back home. That's Cook's pet, named Little Brown Dog, or LBD. The astronaut posted the clip to Twitter saying, "Not sure who was more excited. Glad she remembers me after a year." Too cute. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.